Hope the rules of the quiz is very clear to everyone. While sending the answer, open the chat box, send it as a personal message to me. So I'm going to share the screen. So this is the video of a CT scan of a patient. 60-year-old male. This is the arterial phase. Hope everyone has seen the video. Now I think we can start with the meeting. Welcome Puneet sir as our moderator for this session.
Thankfully, I don't have to participate in the quiz, otherwise I'm sure I would have failed. Nice one. I could see a couple of things, but putting it together is a little interesting. So I think we can kickstart now.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you, sir. Can I start, sir?
Yes, please. Dr. Lohit.
Good evening, everybody. Greetings from Amrita. Today we are here to discuss about a topic, a good topic, a controversial topic, a hilar mass with obstructive jaundice. To biopsy this lesion or not. So when we call of a hilar mass, the three main differential diagnoses which can be thought is a hepatocellular carcinoma, a carcinoma gallbladder, a hilar cholangiocarcinoma. It is very evident and well established how to diagnose a hepatocellular carcinoma. If the size is more than 2 centimeters, any one of the imaging, either the triple phase CT or a dynamic MRI, which shows enhancement in the arterial phase and a washout, can be easily diagnosed, and it is well established. Usually there will be no confusion in diagnosing a hepatocellular carcinoma. The other two main differential diagnoses which comes when a hilar mass is a CAGB or a hilar cholangiocarcinoma. CAGB usually presents as a intraluminal mass or a diffuse mural thickening, or the whole mass replaces the gallbladder. Intraluminal mass being 40% and most common, and it is usually associated with gallstone. These are the typical presentations. And coming to the hilar cholangiocarcinoma, it again depends upon what is the type, periductal type, mass forming, or intraductal growing type. So these are the tumors which are well seen in a delayed venous space, usually long strictures and wall thickness more than 2 mm. If these typical findings are there, it's very easy to diagnose. Problem starts when there are atypical findings, whether to biopsy a mass or not. First, let's see the evidence which is there. So routine two main guidelines, that is ESMO and NCCN. ESMO says when it's a resectable lesion, there is nobody does a percutaneous biopsy, so we don't do a biopsy. So if it's a resectable lesion, we directly go for a staging laparoscopy followed by surgery. And even when we go for NCCN guidelines, so if it's a gallbladder cancer, so we go with a CT MRI of abdomen pelvis, CT chest, then tumor markers, and do a staging laparoscopy. If it's a resectable, we go ahead with surgery. The only role of biopsy comes when the lesion is unresectable and we are planning for a systemic therapy or adjuvant treatment. Again, when it's an intrahepatocellular carcinoma, the same thing. If it's resectable, you do a staging laparoscopy and proceed. Only if it's unresectable on pre-op imaging, then you plan for a biopsy. In a footnote here, for cholangiocarcinoma, they have given us you can consider a biopsy. But when we come down, see the footnote, they say that the preoperative biopsy is not always necessary before proceeding with a definitive potential curative resection. A suspicious mass on imaging in a proper clinical setting should always be treated as malignant. So this is a expert consensus statement which shows there is no need of pathological confirmation prior to resection when we feel it's a malignant lesion on pre-op imaging. So we here in the early 2019, we came across an interesting case. A patient presented to the OPD, 57-year-old male patient. He's a diabetic on insulin with a very good performance status. He presented with chief complaints of abdominal fullness, discomfort since past 1 month, associated with nausea and vomiting, history of reduced appetite. There is no history of significant weight loss. Patient also gives a history of yellowish discoloration of eyes since 2 weeks. There was no history of pruritus or clay colored stools. There was no history of GI bleed, no history of fever, no history of pain abdomen. Patient was evaluated outside and referred to here Amrita for further management. So habits, he was a smoker from past 30 years, 1 pack per day. Physical examination, he was moderately built and nourished, conscious, cooperative to time, place, and person, vital stable. On examination, ictus was present. On per abdomen examination, there was no positive findings. So we went ahead with the blood investigations. We found that the total bilirubin was elevated. Alkaline phosphatase was elevated. Went ahead with tumor markers. So CA99 was very mildly elevated. CA was in normal range. So we came to a conclusion that we are dealing with a case of obstructive jaundice. So further as such, we went ahead with a triple phase CT scan. So we'll just see the images of the CT scan.
Do you have to share the screen or we're not seeing it?
Yes, sir, I'm sharing the screen. So is this visible?
Yes.
So this is a contrast axial CT scan, contrast triple phase scan, axial sections, a venous space CT, lower thoracic cuts. We can see the liver coming up. We can see the bilobar mild IHBRD, which we can see here. The both portal faces, portal veins, the left portal vein, the anterior and the posterior branch. We can see the portal confluence well here. Now we can start seeing a mass here, which near the neck of the GB, also infiltrating the common hepatic duct all the way. And from here, it's difficult to trace on with cholelithiasis. This is the coronal view. You can see the whole mass here. So CT scan was reported as an ill-defined hypoenhancing lesion about 16 into 7 into 30 mm seen involving the GB neck extending up to the hepatic hilum with isolation of right and left hepatic ducts extending along the common hepatic duct causing mild to moderate IHBRD of both lobes. There was a diffuse irregular enhancing mural thickening seen involving the GB extending from and in continuity with the above mentioned lesion. There was a calculi. So they didn't clearly tell whether it's the mass is related to the GB or the mass is related to the bile ducts. So they just mentioned it as a ill-defined hypoenhancing lesions. So we went ahead with a MRI. So MRI was reported as multiple calculi seen in the GB, focal mass seen along the neck of the gallbladder, extending into the body, no pericholecystic collection, cystic duct shows a low insertion in CBD. GB mass appears to extend into the hilum causing obstruction of a common hepatic duct extending into the proximal right and left main hepatic duct causing upstream dilatation of IHBR. However, the secondary confluence was normal, the pancreatic duct was normal, and they gave an impression to consider as primary GB malignancy causing a hilar obstruction. Now, again, seeing the reports of both scans, we were not much convinced whether it's a GB malignancy, which is going into the hilum and extending into the right and left ducts without involving any hilar structures. So we went ahead with the EUS. So we have a EUS image here. So this was a linear probe EUS seen from the D1. So this is the portal vein. This is the liver area. From here we are seeing from the proximal to distal. So this is the portal vein. So they'll apply a color Doppler now. Yeah. So this is the superior mesenteric vein, the portal vein confluence, and this is the CBD. So we'll just follow the CBD through the EUS. So this is the CBD, which we can see. Once we trace it proximally, it's going here, and it gives a cystic duct is given here. It forms the CHD, and above here there is a proper mass which is formed here, completely luminal obstructing mass. This whole thing is the mass. Here they have gone back again and traced. Here you can see the post-aquatic shadow, that is the gallbladder with cholelithiasis. So this is the MRCP picture. So EUS finally, after EUS was done, they reported as the proximal CHD and hilum appears to be replaced by indistinct heteroechoic mass infiltrating the liver with gallstones, and final impression was probably a hilar cholangiocarcinoma with chronic calculus cholecystitis. So now at this juncture, we had two diagnoses, one reporting as CAGB, one reporting as a hilar cholangiocarcinoma. Patient is, in this point, I would like to know the patient is well maintained, good ECOG status. So the further plan, so we had a diagnosis of obstructive jaundice secondary to hilar cholangiocarcinoma. This diagnosis was maintained. We discussed this case in a multidisciplinary meeting, and a decision to go forward with resection was taken. So we planned a staging laparoscopy. The findings of the staging laparoscopy is below here. So it revealed that a large mass arising from the gallbladder, abutting the first part of duodenum, hepatic flexure, probably infiltrating the hepatic duct confluence. Tumor also appeared infiltrating the segment 4, 5, 6 lesions. There was no surface lesions. no ascites, no peritoneal nodules. Left lateral segment appeared cholestatic but had a reasonable volume. So at this point, we felt that the lesion was resectable. So a decision to convert it to open and proceed with the extended right hepatectomy was made. The porta hepatis was frozen, large lymph nodes in the hepatoduodenal ligament, suprapancreatic area, but there was no lymph nodes in the aortocaval area. Now again, there was a dilemma intra-op that this lesion, after seeing it through the naked eye, that it was looking like a carcinoma gallbladder. So anyways, the lesion still appeared resectable, so we proceeded with the right extended hepatectomy. So I'll be discussing the details of surgery, what happened step by step. So once we started dissecting the hilum, so we found that the arterial anatomy, the right hepatic artery, there was a early originating of the right hepatic artery reaching the hilum on the right side of CBD, proper hepatic artery continuing as segment 4. And then there was an accessory artery from the left gastric artery supplying the left lateral segment. When there is an initial hilar dissection, we accidentally injured the segment 4 of the middle hepatic artery. At this point, we didn't know that we will proceed with surgery. So we had to reconstruct it at the end. After some time, when we found out that we have divided the segment 4, the proximal part of the segment 4 artery was not fit for reconstruction. So what we did was we dissected the GDA down, divided the GDA and repositioned it and anastomosis with the distal part of the segment 4. So we went ahead with parenchymal transection. Then we noted that the artery was clotting. See, there was severe clotting tendency. Intra-op, we had to give our anticoagulants and antiplatelets, 75 mg of aspirin through Ryle's tube, 1,500 units of heparin, and 30 milligrams of subcutaneous clexine were given in different period. After redoing the artery twice, we had a good flow. So parenchymal transection was continued by an anterior approach using a CUSA. Then once significant, that is a 2/3 of parenchymal transection was done, then we found that the tumor was adherent to portal vein confluence. In order to achieve a R0 resection, the tumor was removed en bloc with the portal confluence, and the portal vein confluence was repaired with 6-0 Vascofill. The total inflow clamp time was 30 minutes. Post-procedure, an intra-op Doppler was done to confirm the vascular inflow. Then after the resection, we finally found there was 5 ducts in the remnant liver on the cut surface, one being segment 3, segment 2, and 2 caudate ducts, which was anastomosed to the rule loop of the jejunum. There was 3 separate anastomosis done using 6-0 PDS continuous sutures. So post-operatively, intra-op, there was no major problems. Post-operatively, was shifted to ICU. Patient did well post-op, was shifted out of ICU in post-op day 2. These are the post-op day 1 and 2 labs. Although post-op day 1, it was around 6, the bilirubin started coming down. INR on post-op day 1 is 1.69. Post-op day 2 came to 1.46. By post-op day 5, the total bilirubin was below 4. And by post-op day 5, the enzymes also came down, were below 100 almost. And patient was well healthy and got discharged on post-op day 11. So patient went home without any complications. Now the only thing which is remaining is the biopsy report. We were worried also the margins. So this was a gross specimen. Initially, when we saw the pathology described that the mass couldn't be distinguished, but on slicing, there was a clear-cut demarcation between the gallbladder and the liver surface. So the whole specimen was measuring 14 into 8 into 12 centimeters. The gallbladder is not separately seen or identified. Only serosal aspect of the gallbladder can be seen. On slicing, the wall shows concentric thickening of a glistening white firm nature, which is well demarcated from adjacent liver. So on microscopy, the concentric thickle gallbladder was associated with spheroid granuloma, moderate to dense chronic transmural inflammation with predominance of plasma cells with intracytoplasmic Russell bodies, lymphocytes, few eosinophils seen around the glands, traversing through the wall associated with dense curvilinear to curvy circular pattern fibrosis, adhering the gallbladder to the hepatic tissue. So this was a typical microscopy which showed storiform fibrosis. There were no malignant cells. What we found was only lymphoplasmacytic infiltrate. And this is a special stain where the plasma cells are taking up the IgG4. So these are the special stains. Retic stain was done. So finally, an impression was given as a diffuse lymphoplasmacytic sclerosing cholecystitis with cholelithiasis, and the morphology after doing IHC was consistent with IgG4 related disease. The whole summary, all the intra-op decisions was explained in such a detail because the effort which went into taking care of this patient. So the patient is doing well. He is on regular follow-up. The last follow-up was day before yesterday. So it's been 2 years, 2 months since the surgery. He is doing well. He is not on any steroids. His IgG4 levels is under monitoring. The recent one are still awaited. So these are the recent labs. When he came on last, the LFTs is completely normalized. And CBC is also normal. So finally, which we thought either the diagnosis could be a CAGB or it could be a hilar cholangiocarcinoma. It came to a surprise that this is a IgG4 related disease and the patient underwent a morbid surgery. Although he's well now, a right extended apatectomy. So a few slides on what is IgG4 disease. It's basically an immune-mediated fibroinflammatory process with a tendency to form tumefactive lesions in various organs occurring in synchronous or metachronous fashion. So incidence of isolated IgG4 is very, very less. Isolated IgG4 presenting as sclerosing cholangitis is only around 1.4 per 100,000 population. But while in a combination of autoimmune pancreatitis is up to 40%. So it becomes very easy when you have autoimmune pancreatitis with a sclerosing cholangitis. Males are more affected. It in a wide age group has been affected, 20 to 80 years, and the median age being 66 years. The associations are usually autoimmune pancreatitis. 88% of cases are associated. Dacroadenitis and sialoadenitis. Retroperitoneal fibrosis, which was previously called as the Ormond's disease, is seen in 70%. When there is an association with sclerosing cholangitis, it is easy to diagnose. But when you get an isolated sclerosing cholangitis, that's the problem. So there is a Japanese Biliary Association in 2012, which has given a guideline to diagnose IgG4. So the diagnostic items are a biliary tract imaging reveals diffuse or segmental narrowing of intrahepatic and extrahepatic bile ducts associated with thickening of the bile duct. This is first diagnostic criteria. Or a hematological examination of elevated IgG4 concentration more than 135 mg per dl, coexistence of autoimmune pancreatitis, IgG4 related dacroadenitis, or IgG4 related retroperitoneal fibrosis. Or the histopathological examination showing marked lymphocytic or plasmacytic infiltration and fibrosis, infiltration of IgG4 positive plasma cells, storiform fibrosis, obliterative phlebitis. So these are the diagnostic 1, 2, 3, 4. So definitely it is diagnostic when 1 and 3 is present. That is when there is a biliary tract imaging with the coexistence of autoimmune pancreatitis or IgG4 related disease, then it's definitive. If you get both this, the diagnosing IgG4 is relatively simple. And again, the serum markers or serum elevations of IgG4 is not sensitive. The ratio is more specific rather than isolated IgG4. And anyways, histopathological is almost confirmatory. If we are able to diagnose it preoperatively, it is very good actually. So this is the typical findings. If it's an IgG4 disease, there is autoimmune pancreatitis and the sheet-like covering whole the extrahepatic and extending into the hilum and sometimes the intrahepatic duct also, sclerosing cholangitis, and with the autoimmune pancreatitis. If such finding is found, it is usually a benign disease. There is usually a IgG4 disease. This terminology is quite new. Only it's been used from past 1 decade. It usually presents as stricture, and Nakazawa has classified on cholangiogram findings how the IgG4 strictures are classified. So basically, if you are lucky enough to diagnose IgG4 before major surgery, the treatment is through oral steroids. The other treatment like immunosuppressive drugs, azathioprine, everything is used, and B-cell depleting agents, rituximab for maintenance therapy is also used. So now when it's in NCC guidelines, there is a thing which is added to consider serum IgG4 levels to rule out autoimmune cholangitis. Thank you. So these are the following issues we need to be diagnosed. So how many if the initial biopsy was reported as IgG4? So I have talked to my pathology colleagues. It is very difficult to diagnose IgG4 through FNAC. The minimum thing they need is a true cut biopsy. So in a hilar mass, how do you take a true cut biopsy? And if at all it is reported as IgG4, how would you treat this patient? This is open for discussion. Thank you.
Nice case. I think is Arsian going to give some comments, or can I start?
Sir, you can start, sir. Sorry.
So I mean, just a couple of things. Clinically, when you started out, you were already biased when you said because the mind only sees what the eye only sees what the mind is thinking about. So one thing was what were the clinical odd points? So a lot of red herrings were there. So let's start with the. So what is the clinical? What is the starting point? What is the clinical presentation itself?
Clinical presentation was upper abdominal discomfort with jaundice of noticed icterus from past 2 weeks, sir.
And the jaundice highest was how much?
3, not more than that, sir.
So that's the crucial thing. So, it's very, very rare for us to have a malignancy which is so low. So you kept HCC there, but you didn't keep benign. So I guess the clear diagnosis in Kerala would be cholangiocarcinoma. But I think in the north, CAGB is much commoner. So we have to keep that in the DD. And here, just on the imaging alone, CAGB actually would be much higher for several reasons. But I mean, first and foremost, with a low bilirubin and a short history, and if you see the imaging, one odd point was that you got a hilar obstruction without significant biliary dilatation is all odd. So I still feel just on the imaging alone, CAGB would be number one. So your question was only about whether we should take a biopsy or not. First is, should we consider a benign diagnosis or not? So I think even in the south, xanthogranulomatous is very common. So you have to keep, and second is IgG related. So I think you have to keep a benign, a potentially benign condition in mind. Not probably as relevant in this particular patient, but in an elderly comorbid patient, you can't go and do a trisegmentectomy without a firm diagnosis. So basically why I'm saying we need to take a clinical call earlier is because everything is, all your guidelines, all your discussion is post facto after you've already diagnosed it. So patient doesn't come with a label. What we actually need, I personally feel all these NCCN guidelines are good for the oncologists. They're not good for surgeons at all. Because what we need is algorithms on how patients present and what we should do in that case. Okay. So simple example, EUS, what would be the role for EUS? I have never, in an established mass, I haven't seen EUS clarifying. It can only confuse. So EUS is fantastic if you don't find a mass and you have obstructed jaundice, you have dilated bile duct, pancreatic duct. EUS is fantastic. I think the best possible investigation to make sure that there's no stone or look for a mass there, which you haven't seen on a CT or something. Fantastic tool for that. I wouldn't do a Whipple without doing an EUS in such a scenario. But, as a problem solving tool, because, it's more useful for the near rather than the far. So you actually, instead of getting the global picture, you end up seeing a smaller picture. So it can confuse. So the only reason for doing an EUS would probably be to take a biopsy. Or, if you see IgG4 would hardly be a suspicion. Xantho would be a much commoner suspicion. But I can just give you one clinical clue that Sudeep Shah taught me. And I find that very useful is look at the globulin. I think I think Jaipal or somebody had presented the case and he pointed that out. I don't know if you remember that in one of the Monday morning sessions. So he said, we don't normally think of the globulin, but if you make a habit of looking at the globulin component, so very rarely will that be high. So not an AG reversal, but if you're seeing a high globulin of more than 3.5, you have to think of something wrong somewhere, some kind of either, there is some reason for, since all the antibodies, gamma globulins are all globulin. So if the globulin moiety is very high, so one thing I've always done is I always have a look at the, some of the things we miss out, which we do routinely. One is RDW and the other is globulin. We never look at these, they're very good clues. So that is the one thing I wanted to say. I would still have, just on the imaging, probably diagnosed CAGB first, because the cholangiogram film you showed was that shift towards that side. The CT itself showed dense stones. So in obstruction, we can get a pigment type stone sludge or that kind of stuff. But this was a dense calcareous stone. So it's much more likely to be a cause of a malignancy rather than the effect of obstruction. And then you can actually see shouldering going along the GB wall itself. If you look at the film again now, you'll actually see the shouldering is a taper. It's not a shoulder like, it's more like achalasia than like CA esophagus. So you're not seeing a shouldering intraluminally, which would be typical of CAGB. If you're seeing that kind of thing, you would probably see that much more. So just on that CT film alone, my diagnosis would be Xantho as well. Since it's a young, fit male, we can never be sure. You still have, the question you raised about whether biopsy should be taken, I think is very, very correct. Because in a young, fit male, we would probably still resect, principally because CAGB has such a dismal prognosis. And the only chance we have is with surgery. So the only worry is if it's an elderly comorbid, somebody with extremes of age where you're not worried, where you're worried that whether, making a wrong diagnosis could be lethal as well. So then finally, if your diagnosis was CAGB, I think diagnostic laparoscopy was a fantastic tool. I was just wondering why you never considered a PET instead of a EUS, considering cost-wise it would be probably not too much different. Simple reason being that if it's CAGB, a PET might rule out a when you're going to do a major surgery. I think it's a good idea. So PET may not be positive, but if it is, if you pick up some other lesion, you want to know whether you're going to go ahead with a non-therapeutic major surgery. So that's just a thought, but only if your index of suspicion for CAGB is high, which you seem to think it was. Am I right? EUS, I'm not so sure, but based on the CT and MR, it looked more like CAGB rather than a benign condition. So if you're thinking of CAGB, I think DiagLab was fantastic. But why wasn't a routine aortocaval biopsy done? You don't look for lymphadenopathy. You have to do a biopsy. So, I think because in Kerala, CAGB is not common, so we don't do it routinely because it's usually a hilar cholangio. But here you clearly had so that was one clue that I think probably we should do a aortocaval node, because if it's positive, doing such a major surgery is not going to be this thing. The other red herrings were the low alk phos and bilirubin and all that. So that's very, very unlikely in benign disease. It's always a marker of, even in chronic pancreatitis, when we want to differentiate from malignancy, we say those points, isn't it? So in a biliary malignancy, that's even more important to people, especially extrinsic. So it need not be IgG4 or CAGB alone, Xantho alone. It could be extrinsic, it could be a weird lymphoma or something which is pressing upon that. So many of the rare diagnoses, the soft tissue tumors might come into that picture. And finally, biology. We haven't given time for biology. So again, I actually agree. I'm on your side because I feel if it's CAGB, we don't have time for biology. But if you're thinking of cholangiocarcinoma, so you see, if you look at the CT images, there's hardly any. There's some subtle left ductal dilatation. We'll never get that huge a mass with hardly any dilatation. That's very odd. So we must think of benign whenever we see those odd points. So that's my comments. It's open for discussion to everybody else. RCN, do you have any thoughts, Joshi? Meanwhile, I'll hunt up last week we had a case. So here in the north, it's much more common to have CAGB. So it's exact reverse of what you had. So I was laughing, because here we are not thinking of benign conditions as well, or of cholangiocarcinoma. So even after they put up in our group, I'll just share that with you if I find that. And I mean, if you look at it now in hindsightography, we still haven't got the biopsy, but I can lay a wager that it's going to be a xantho. You can see an absolutely clear margin. Since the CT had said it's CAGB, we had gone ahead with a right hepatectomy because it was more on the right side. I'll just try and hunt up while the others give their points. RCN Joshi, Brigadier Narayanan is also there. I think we can have his wise words. He's got one of the largest experiences in so many years. He was in PGI, then Amrita.
I agree with you, Puneet, sir. Hello, sir. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. You're audible.
Sir?
Sir, you're audible, sir.
Yeah. So our initial suspicion was CAGB only, and CAGB versus chronic cholecystitis, probably that is affecting probably the inflammation is affecting the proximal hilum. Then, as you know, in Kerala, the hyalocholangiocarcinoma is it's not that rare. So we entertained that possibility also. So we actually wanted to do take a biopsy to rule out CAGB. So that was the indication for men. That's why we have sent him for a US. But the gastroenterologist who did the US, he felt that it is more of a hyalocholangiocarcinoma. There is no point in taking FNAC. So that's why he didn't do that. And then he specifically looked at aortocaval lymph nodes. He couldn't see any aortocaval lymph nodes. So he didn't take any FNAC from the aortocaval area. We did a diaglap and then we explored that area. We again searched for aortocaval lymph node, but we didn't wait for the aortocaval lymph node first section biopsy to proceed. We specifically looked for aortocaval lymph node, but it was all small. So the benefit of doubt was given to the patient. He was otherwise a fit guy. So we thought probably we are dealing with a locally advanced CAGB and we went ahead with resection. My doubt is how convincingly we will be able to diagnose a benign disease. That's the problem. Even if you get a US biopsy, negative biopsy, I really don't know this sort of a setting, how convincingly we'll be able to rule out an underlying malignancy. If it is a malignancy, probably this is the only time you can give a R0 resection and probably a better chance for survival, especially with CAGB. So that's a worry.
No, you're absolutely right. I think the crucial thing is not unlike other places where we are looking for a positive, a negative biopsy being negative. I think what is crucial is, are we getting something else? So the two things we get is typically the xantho, rarely IgG4, and sometimes more commonly even things like rare stuff like tuberculosis or lymphomas or something like that. Actually, I don't know if you guys are interested. I'll try and send the link in I did a CPC for AIIMS Delhi for a similar case actually. It's almost an hour and a half of discussion. If you're interested, I can post that link where we discussed all this at great length. Again, a very interesting case. So, sorry, you asked a specific question. Yeah, so basically, if we find a positive diagnosis of something else, so merely getting a negative report is not going to be crucial. So again, like you said, EUS biopsy in this particular, so in a pancreatic malignancy, it's different because it's going to come out with the tumor. Here, the only reason for doing an EUS biopsy is for gallbladder cancer. I wouldn't do it unless we are considering an HPD or something like that, because we are still, it's such an aggressive malignancy, we are still transgressing it. So I would go with exactly what you did. But if it's a borderline patient, either there's a dodgy lesion on PET or a dodgy comorbidity, which increases risk, or anything else, which puts him on borderline resectability, I would actually take up, you can do a simple cholecystectomy and do a biopsy and still go ahead without losing out. Intraop, you don't lose out anything. So if your index of suspicion of benign is high, but my point is he didn't even mention benign, he mentioned HCC, He didn't even mention a possible benign cause. So especially with the low bilirubin, with low jaundice, yeah, I mean, Pitambar Singh, whether spyglass could have been done, all that thing is there. Again, spyglass is more for CA, either a papilliferous or a cholangiocarcinoma, papillary CAGB or a cholangiocarcinoma, it will actually help. But again, like Arsian said, if it's negative, we are not going to, we don't have the reliance. But like he said about the biopsy, if we get a positive diagnosis of, say, a granulomas there, or xanthoid elements there, or IgG4 kind of, autoimmune kind of stuff there, we might preclude that. But I'm saying, if we step back and take a look at just the globulin itself in every case, that's a very good clue. We picked up one case after Sudeep Shah's suggestion, and we don't lose anything by giving a 4-5 day. It's somebody with with a clinical suspicion like this, very low index of suspicion. So somebody with 20-30 bilirubin, I completely agree with you. I wouldn't go there. So only in a case like this, where the bilirubin is not very high, the index of malignancy itself is there. And lose malignancy is going to spread it. I don't know this feeling. Anything which spreads in 5 days, we are not going to cure as surgeons. So we can give a short trial of steroids, particularly the globulin is high. But we do this only if we think of it. So IgG4, like I said, so in Xanto, we would still tend to do like I said. So I don't know. I think when you were, it was in front of you. Supriya was assisting me for a case which on. If I think I found that thing, I'll just show you the one which we did here. So it's because the one here in Rishikesh reminded me of that Supriya's case. That's one politician's relative who the whole family has a colorectal cancer. I forget the thing. So we've operated, I think, every member of the family, and this one came with a GB mass. And the diaglap actually showed us sort of exactly like the one I'll just show you. I said it's CAGB for sure. We went ahead and I said, since it looks papillary type and all, why don't we resect the CBD? And Supriya stopped me. She said, we don't even have a diagnosis of CA. Should we be going ahead and doing a major malignancy? The oncologists don't even want to give a chemotherapeutic drug. But we want to do all potentially, dangerous surgery. So I agree with her, because it was a clear margin. I said we can always go in again within 3-4 days. We'll get a biopsy. We can go in again, and we actually stopped. And it was Xantho. So I'll just is it possible for me to share? Are you sharing? How do I share here? Okay, I can't see the share screen.
You can share, sir. I made you co-host.
Okay. One sec. So I'll so what do I select? Share screen, no?
Yeah.
Sir, on that note, can I ask what was the globulin level for this patient pre-op?
Can you see my screen?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
You can see? Okay. So can you see that?
Yes, sir.
So if you see, unfortunately, I don't have the CT here because I'm just picking it up from WhatsApp. So this is the exact kind of picture on the fundus side, and it is showing edema into the liver parenchyma and all that. So fairly suggestive of CML, this thing, and intrahepatic, the right duct was also slightly compressed. So just a second, I'll try and show you the other. So this is after the the dissection, and this is post. And when this was put there and I saw the margins, I said, this is definitely not, and after this they actually put, I think they cut this thing also, isn't it? Yeah. So I said, go to the path next morning, and I noticed only in the evening. I said, go to path next morning and take a photograph of the cut section. And you can see, can you see that? Beautifully, the edge is completely clear. There is no, cancerous invasion into it. So this is exactly what the case we had in Amrita as well. So especially in areas where CAGB is low, we do need to think of about other xanthonol. So I don't know yet. This one also they're saying it might be IgG4, but we don't have the final diagnosis yet. But just to tell you that unless we are thinking of those and we are seeing those definite, like we get fat stranding in pancreatitis like that, if we're getting that stranding into the thing, it's very typical of malignancy. But when we're getting very sharp margins and the way if you see here also, there is no shouldering. It's going gradually. The thing is funneling out. The wall edge is funneling out. Which is, if you share the images there, I think you'll be able to see just the same thing. Can I stop? Yeah. Wasn't that very typical of what? So I think one way is we keep going and seeing the specimen. So that's a habit none of us surgeons have. We leave it to the pathologists. But I think I've learned in the last 20 years, I've learned maximum in MDTs, in the multidisciplinary team meetings. Meetings like this where other colleagues are there, the radiology meetings, the pathology meetings, and the tumor boards. I think looking at a patient, what is the right thing to do? So we have we are there. Oh, this is a thing. It's very likely to be malignant. How can I answer the patient if it's not a malignancy? So once we start going on that algorithmic path, we might choose the wrong one. 99% we choose the right one, but as super specialists, I think we need to think of a little different from what a general surgeon would think. So I think that's the one message I wanted to share. Any other thoughts, anybody?
Sir, I have one more question, sir. Hello.
Yeah, you are audible.
Yeah, we can hear you.
If you would have diagnosed IgG4 disease before surgery, okay, suppose FNAC we have taken and it is suggestive of probably IgG4 disease, how differently we could have managed this case? Just steroid or stent with steroid? How long?
I don't believe you're asking this because you're the one who changed my approach to pancreas. Do you remember that? You're the one who pushed me for IgG, for autoimmune pancreatitis. In fact, I was not even aware of that entity. You're the one who brought me, you showed me a couple of cases, and I don't know if you remember that, and pushed me towards saying that why can't we give a steroid trial in some of these patients?
One of our patients, Shankara Narayanan, I think probably we lost that patient. It was a lymphoplasmacytosis.
Yeah, this feeling that, so I think when everybody says that we should be like surgical oncologists, we should be called GI surgical oncology. I think the difference between a GI surgeon and a surgical oncologist, if you pardon me, because here it's a closed group, so I can afford to say it, is we think of my patient. We are so anatomically familiar with that area. We are thinking of my patient. Whereas the onco approach is, there are 100 cases of this. What would be the best approach? I think that's where I changed my way of thinking, is because, that's where all the statistics comes in. So here we are ready to, okay, we have to save our, what is that American movie, Saving Private Ryan. We have to save our patient and go and do, the American histrionics and go and save somebody from the jaws of death also because he's the only son and all that. So whereas, you have to see, there's a fantastic law school movie which was shared today about, engine driver who's going on a path, sees 5 people in front of him. And he sees there's a side way where only one person is working and which way should he turn. It's a very, very interesting. I'll share that also. I think that's a very important, medically very important thing because it answers the exact question which RCN raised just now. What do I do if so more than IgG4, I'm very clear in my mind, if my suspicion is IgG4, which would be lower in this case, I must confess. It's easy to say it in hindsightography, but it would be lower than Xantho. Xantho, the worry is it's a pre-malignant condition as well. So IgG4, we know the chance of it being malignant is very low. You can give a trial, you can give a chance, and in a short enough time, you can get an answer that whether it is inflammatory only condition or not. And if there's any sign of resolution, you can wait a little longer, do a repeat imaging. In Xantho, it's much more difficult because the process is more lingering. So you might not get an answer within even 2 weeks. You might not get a significant one. And second is, it is pre-malignant as well. So I completely agree with you. If there's a doubt in those terms, I would actually err on the side of a resection in a otherwise fit patient. I completely agree with you. I'm only saying the outliers where it is borderline resectable. So, it is clearly, normally I don't think many CAGBs are cured by, despite Anil Agarwal's paper. Out of the 10,000 cases worldwide, 2 cases are saved out of 10,000 trisegmentectomies. So extended right is let's be very pragmatic. An odd patient would be saved, but if there are 100 patients, only 1 would be saved out of those. If you do 100 extended right liver resections. Beyond 1 year lifespan would be very low. But cholangio, that's why the difference, I think what he was trying, I thought that's what he was trying to highlight. Cholangiocarcinoma is much more, much better prognosis. So if we have a doubt, we err on the side of resection for sure. But resection of the entire, try to take out there. So yeah, so sorry, there's another clinical nugget I wanted to share. So when you get a obstruction in the middle part of the, so when it's hilar, it's always malignancy. When it's lower end of CBD, it's always malignancy. But the mid CBD, 9 times out of 10, it is benign. I think RCN would remember so many cases. Dinesh, initially, I remember he was operating on a similar case and he said, let's see. And it turned out. And after that, he was the one who pointed out in 3 more cases after that, that it's a mid CBD, it's more likely to be malignancy.
But
So
here the
should we do
problem-
biopsy in hilar mass if doubtful of benign condition? No, obviously not. We'll have to go by clinical. Here there are some clinical clues that they could be benign because of low. So the garden variety will be very high bilirubin and very high jaundice. So I don't think it's worth doing a biopsy. Like RCN said, a biopsy would, if it's negative, you don't know anything. But if you think of something specific, for instance, there is no CBD obstruction, not much of CBD obstruction with a very high jaundice, and you're seeing a large extrinsic mass, you can actually intraoperatively biopsy that. Yes, I would do if it turns out to be a lymphoma, I may not do a triseg. I might just do a local resection and get a decent biopsy and do it. So yes, the biopsy could be conditional, but by and large, in out of 100 cases, in 90% of them, you probably would not take a biopsy. So whoever asked that question just now, the answer would be probably no. Here, since it was low bilirubin and shorter history, we just have to think of that as well. Sorry, RCN, you were saying something.
No, I agree with your point, sir. It's if it is a pure mid CBD. But interestingly, here actually that was involving the confluence, and even it was going on both sides of the confluence. So it's not just a mid CBD one.
Yeah, but I mean the mass is principally, if you see, it is the GB CHD area.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
no, I agree with you. It is obviously what I'm talking about is particularly when you see a very small mass within mid CBD. I can guarantee you it's, if you, I think Dinesh did look at them. Out of the 10 cases we had, most of them were benign. There was one papillary tumor. So papillary is an exception where you can get multiple or extensive lesions and it's still operable. It's still very good prognosis. So if you see papillary, I wouldn't take a biopsy. I would just actually go ahead and do as aggressive resection. Those are the best. RCN would remember a case where we had done I think after 15 years or something, came back with a pancreatic papillary tumor in the distal. In fact, that's the first discontinuous one I've seen. You don't even have, isn't it? RCN, do you remember?
Yeah,
Very interesting.
I remember.
Case.
Yeah. She's still living. She's still alive.
Yeah, I know. I remember. I think the grandchild also wants to join early. Like they say, golf, join GI surgery early. Is it?
So, somebody has asked about Lucknow approach.
Right. Sorry, what was the last one?
Utkarsh.
So Lucknow approach, I think what he means is if there is look at the gallbladder wall, if there's a uniform thickening versus a generalized thickening. So that's only valid with where thickening is the thing. So whoever asked that question, if you can unmute yourself and ask specifically, if the point you meant was the uniform versus generalized thickening, it's absolutely right. That's probably not valid here because here the worries of the biliary obstruction part. It's not about the GB wall thickening alone. But I agree with you, the GB wall thickening here was more suggestive of CAGB, but still there's a gradual funnel type taper rather than a shouldering effect. It was like achalasia kind of a picture. So the globulin was 4.16, is it? So I think Sudeep needs a pat in the back because I think I have noticed this is a very, very important clue. So guys, at least that's one. If you just take home this from, and Japal also, I think, told me that he found another patient in Andhra after he went back with a high globulin. So I think that's a very, very useful clue because, we'll never think of ordering, but at least look at it each time so that we get a habit of doing, like when we're doing ascitic fluid, if we don't do an amylase, we'll miss out all the pancreatic amylases. So even an alcoholic cirrhotic, if we don't do an amylase, we'll never get those cases of internal pancreatic fistulas. So I think just keeping it in the mind, and the advantage of such cases that they remind us to do what we need to put into our routine practice of all the easy to look at stuff. So if you look at the outliers, the clinical outliers, the lab outliers, then we tend to see patterns. And I don't know if you realize that, but AI is doing exactly this. It's putting all this big data into the computers, and it's taking out that the likelihood of it being malignancy. So, even though we feel that the personal touch is lost, but I think actually it's doing that same personal touch, the experience, much more logically. So I personally feel it's going to show us a better picture. I'm sure Arsian thinks otherwise. He thought that about the robot, and now he's one of the biggest robotic surgeons. I think there's some more questions. If I'm on this thing, so if somebody has a laptop, can read out. Was there a role for just taking a biopsy when you did a diaglap and wait for the report? Yeah. So if Joshi asked if there's there is a case for that. If it's I would do that if it's an elderly comorbid case where the risk of operating in a poor center where poor center, I mean, where they don't have the expertise for hepatectomy so easily. So I would reserve in that center hepatectomy only for the definitely curative ones. So will there be a day when confocal will be married to Spiga? Lovely question. Who's that? Oh, has to be Ramesh, isn't it? Yeah. So Ramesh, yes, absolutely. That's such a fantastic thought. I think if we can utilize. So I think one message from that is that surgeons should be more familiar with. You can see Brigadier Narayanan with such a huge experience. He's tuning in for at this age also tuning in to a surgical case because he knows he's going to learn more. There's so much I've learned from him and his approach to what can it be rather than, just surgeons, we tend to have, just think of malignancy and go ahead with it. So yes, very good question. There's some patients with incidentally detected elevated globulin levels. Do we need to evaluate them? So I think that's, if you have a reason for showing, one of the commonest reasons for globulin elevation would be some kind of autoimmune, some kind of a pathology where, so if somebody's had a recent vaccination with a huge antibody surge, yes, of course, that might be the reason. But if there's an unexplained rise of globulin, I think I would think of autoimmune disease. So if there's no thyroiditis, no other thing, I think it's a very good clue. So it's a very good nugget which I have benefited from. I think it's worth sharing here. In fact, I think we should publish it if we have enough number of cases. Anybody else is there? Well, I can see Jaipal also there. Nice. Madhu. Ramesh, do you have any comments, Ramesh?
On what?
Dr. H. Huh?
Sorry, I missed that intervening part. You were asking me?
Yeah. I said any thoughts on what would be the.
Sorry.
Anything you would do differently or any thoughts in this thing? So I think it's a very good learning experience because I would probably do exactly the same as Arsian did because he's a young, fit patient and I don't want to lose out that opportunity. So I think I would do exactly the same.
Probably, as you said, I since the bilirubin is low, I also may give a short waiting period and see what's the trend. And since the bilirubin is very low.
So very, very, very important point that Ramesh is pointing out is testing biology. So CAGB is one of the few places where I'm personally very scared to test biology. But for instance, CA pancreas, doubt with chronic pancreatitis, where there's an acute pain episode, that repeating a scan in 2-3 weeks might actually tell you whether it's reducing or increasing. Of course, it doesn't stop the fact that there could be inflammation superimposed on malignancy, but some clues are there in a patient who's very. So I think what Ramesh says is absolutely important point, especially in the lower end tumors, which are not so malignant. So we can actually wait and see for them. Yeah, like classic example is I think cystic tumors of the pancreas. I've seen whenever we've rushed in, it's been actually not, it's been a serous cyst and all that, particularly a Whipple being done for that. So I think there's some places you can actually look for it. Sometimes even months they don't grow. Hemangioma, you can actually watch for it. So it's very easy to say that when it is already looks unresectable and would need a major resection, it's an easy diagnosis, easy suggestion. So it's on the other end of the spectrum that, a very early lesion that we are most worried about. So very early, again, if the tumor doubling time expected is low, we can wait for at least a couple of weeks, 2-3 weeks, and see if there's any growth, particularly lab wise. If we are not seeing an elevation of ALK-Phos, it's very, very suspicious indeed. I would think of an extrinsic mass. I think I'll share that CPC of AIIMS, where the pathologist has actually had a nice, pathologist and radiologists have got very good discussions as well. Any other thoughts, anybody? I was told it's the entire ASGK is a panelist. Nobody's coming forward. So how long do you normally have these?
So we go till the end of the discussion, sir.
Okay. That's the advantage and disadvantage of Zoom, isn't it?
Yeah.
So Lohit, do you have any thoughts as well? I mean, if you go back and you have a similar case somewhere in a smaller center, what would you do differently? Since you're the one who's actually seen it in most detail. But I'm so thrilled that the globulin turned out to be high, because that would have been a clue. I actually missed the LFT slide. That's why I asked you for those things. So I think Pitu, one of the things we could do differently is have a discussion after the presentation, because what I've seen is you'll get a lot of suggestions at that time which are useful in other cases as well. Once we reveal the entire thing, we sort of go on one line only. But if we stop at before revealing the thing and have a discussion, I think we'll come up with a lot of very good points at that time. So I'm pretty sure Ramesh would have said at that time that the bilirubin is low. Why aren't you thinking of a benign condition? So once you already see that, you are already biased. So. But definitely, what I've seen is especially in chronic pancreatitis, if your levels are low and they're not progressive or they actually reduce. RCN would remember the case of portal biliopathy, which you presented as a clinical case capsule, Rosa, who eventually went on to get a shunt as well. We resected her as a cholangiocarcinoma. So she had a CT done from outside, which showed a mass in the hilum and all that. Was explored in another hospital in Cochin. Said that there's a growth there, is referred to us. The patient said, she didn't say that, but we were on her side saying, why should we spend more money on the CT scan? And our radiologist actually said that they would recommend a repeat CT. So I said it's going to be awkward for the patient. They've come from a poorer hospital, and we're going to spend. We resected that. It was actually a portal biliopathy. We resected it it was a portal cavernoma which we resected. There was no tumor at all. And when we went back to the case file, the jaundice level was actually fluctuating. So there's a big. So when I presented in Bhopal, I still remember that till that time, the only publication was ours. And Sanjay Govil got up and said, you have a publication on this. How can you do that? And I had to say, when I moved to the south, we didn't have portal hypertension and all that kind of stuff. But it's an important lesson. And I think after that, we routinely do a CT in our center now after that to make sure that, we're not missing out anything if the phasing is not good. So I think sometimes we try to save money for the patients. We shouldn't do it at the cost of, academic knowledge or in the patient's best interest. We don't need to do it routinely to make money for the hospital, but we should do it whenever there's a slight doubt also of phasing or anything like that. Anybody else has any point? I seem to be hogging the discussion. Feeling a little. Jaipal sir, no thoughts?
No, so only the serum globulin thing. Only globulin can go up in many conditions, sir. Like even
but they're all
can go up.
In what? Cholangiocarcinoma.
Not just cholangitis.
Why?
Any inflammatory condition, globulin can go up, sir. Means.
Yeah. So cholangitis, it will go up because the antibody levels are high. Yes. So the fact that in any cholangitis, in cholangitis, you will get high transaminases, high leukocyte count, high CA99. None of that is there. So if you're getting an isolated increase in antibodies in globulins, you will think of this. So I agree with you. It's a very non-specific condition, non-specific thing. But think of something abnormal if it is very high. Don't discard that.
Yes.
So with low bilirubin, no clinical evidence of cholangitis, no. So I didn't say think of IgG4. I said look for thyroid. Thyroid would be the second most common, I think. So look for other conditions, autoimmune conditions where antibody. So basically, it could be a recent COVID vaccine. We don't know.
Yes, sir.
So any recent infection, you might have a surge in antibodies. So it just implies increased alpha, beta, gamma. It need not always be gamma or IgG4, but it's a
Yes.
clue that there's a possibility because it's something we do it routinely every day.
Yes, sir. Retrospectively thinking, when I thought whenever I see LFT, I used to concentrate more on the albumin. Usually, we never not much bothered about globulin in many of the cases. Even whatever the case it is, most of the times concentrate on the albumin. If albumin is normal, we are happy. So I
Yeah,
think
I
global
don't know if it was
concentration
you or Datta who said that they went back and found a case like this. Just looking at the globulin, not you. Okay, I think it is Datta then.
I think that's sir. Thank you, sir. Nice.
I think this is the right case because all other features are pointing to an outlier, sir, as you always say. So this is a young male where CAGB is not the first thing that you think of. So
Very nice case here. Very nice case. Shall we call it a day if there's no other, anybody wants to make a point?
There is no more further discussion. We'll go back to the cues.
Yeah, of course.
Actually, there were no correct answers for the cues. So I'll just play it once again. If anybody can, sir, I think you have some points in your mind. I think you have to come up with that.
So I must confess I'm terrible at radiology. So the things that I looked at was gastric dilatation was there. There's something odd at the duodenal end. I couldn't follow that. I somehow like to have control of the mouse and do that myself. And on the right iliac, there was thickening of the right colon. And there's at one point it looked like whether there's an intussusception there. But there's distal distal colon was also dilated right up to the rectum. There's some thickening there. So in the rectum itself, there was some funny thing in the lumen. I don't know whether I missed that or it was just something which came up.
Sir, you are damn on the point, and the answer is intussusception, ileocolic intussusception. I'll play the video again.
I think you'll have to share the screen.
Yeah, I'm going to share.
There's a massive gastric dilatation as well, isn't it?
Yeah, actually, that is post oral contrast, sir.
Okay. No, but I mean, I saw the first part. So it was not up to the SMA, but it was only first, second part junction. It sort of looked like a twist there. So I was wondering whether the intussusception actually caused a slight volvulus.
Yeah, there is some hiatus hernia is there.
So this looked like a very sharp angulation of the gastroduodenum. No? Yeah, that's the thickening of the colon.
1 minute. I'll play it again. Sorry. Tell me where to stop.
Yeah, here. Yeah. So
Sorry, it's not right.
yeah, that's okay. Actually, show the deception first. We might now that it's like this IELTS exam. When you're thinking of the previous thing and you go on to the next. Yeah. So the right colon is nicely showing the. And that point, at that exact point, I think it showed the intussusceptum. But why is there distal colon also?
Yeah.
Yes.
A few odd things. One, the small bowel, entire small bowel loops are completely collapsed, and
it's a reverse, exactly, isn't it? Yeah.
Descending colon, rectum, and all is maybe contrast. I don't know. Maybe.
Actually, it is rectal contrast given.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So that actually confused
No, but you obviously got that. So that's a very good clue. I didn't think of the rectal contrast. Arsian got that. So
No. He only told.
Achha, okay.
This is the interception.
Yeah. Superb. Yeah. What they call it something, no? Renal Highland sign or something. What is that?
Target sign. So this claw
target is
sign. Yeah.
Claw. Yeah, this is more like claw. Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Lovely quiz also.
Thank you. Excellent presentation. Thank you, Puneet sir, for your wonderful and thoughtful inputs. All the participants, thank you, Pidambaran, for your today's quiz program. Thank you all. So today's was the 6th one. So next month we will be having our 7th one. So till then, goodbye.